Hi, I'm Francis. We're here today in my friend Kelly's kitchen where I'm going to be cooking up a feast for 6 people. My ethos is everyone sharing the same experience with the food, not one person having one dish, one person having another dish, everyone getting jealous of each other's food. You know, French peasant food and Spanish tapas, having a mouthful, have you tried this with this, have you tried that with that? And I think that's what encourages good conversation about food. So the dishes we're going to be cooking today are
some beautiful heritage tomatoes marinated in a nice light red wine, some roast and pickled beetroot with a few herbs, and the pièce de résistance, a beautiful piece of venison loin which we're going to cook nice and rare and serve with confit Jerusalem artichokes, pickled walnuts and a sticky walnut sauce. For dessert, we're going to do some poached pears in a kind of mulled wine sort of thing, and we're going to serve that with a really simple Amaretto Chantilly cream. Now, before we get started, I reckon there's
2 things that are the most important thing when you're cooking and planning a dinner party. One is to make sure that you do things in the right order. So we're going to start off with the artichokes because they take the longest to cook, and that's how we're going to run today. So that when it comes to presenting the dinner party, you've got everything ready at the same time. The second thing is to enjoy it. So make sure you've got some good, strong liquor to work with, a little bit for the pot and a little bit for the chef.
Let's start off by getting those artichokes into confit for the venison dish.
Artichokes will come in all different sorts of shapes and sizes depending on where you get them from. For ease, try and look for some fairly clean ones. There's so many different dishes that we're going to be serving people. Really, you just almost want like a little sample of each, but enough for everyone to get a good taste. So we're going to start to prep these now.
You don't want these woody bits, so chop them off.
Like that. And you can see now you've got that nice firm flesh, and that's the bit that's good to eat. The next stage is to cut these artichokes down into nice even sizes. If you cut them into nice even sizes, they're all going to cook at the same kind of time.
So now we're going to stick some sort of aromatic flavours into this.
I'm just going to chop a whole garlic in half and stick that in there. And then we're going to choose a few nice herbs to go in. So we've got a nice big bunch of sage. We're going to stick that on the board. I've got some lovely thyme here. And pack it in one end of your roasting dish, because what you don't want is when these artichokes are cooked to have lots of stringy bits of thyme and sage stalks all over, because they're not such nice eating. What you want is the flavour out of them, and the flavour from those herbs is going to pervade the oil, and that's going to give you a really, really delicious flavour without having all sorts of detritus all over your food.
Then we'll season it.
Salt, they can take a lot, so plenty of salt and a bit of black pepper. I've got some ground. Tiny bit of sugar because that will bring out the sweetness of the artichokes. And then the acidity. Got a nice sherry vinegar here, but you could use maybe a red or white wine vinegar if you can't get sherry vinegar. So we're just going to sprinkle a fair slug of that over the top of them. Then finally the oil. Confit means slow cooking in fat essentially. But you don't have to spend loads of money on duck fat or beef dripping, just a nice bit of sunflower oil or non-GM rapeseed oil, but you need to cover them. And I'm going to top it up with a fairly good quality olive oil. Olive oil's got a really nice sort of bitterness to it. I'd say probably 70-30 sunflower or vegetable oil to olive oil. And then when you're happy with that, cover them really nice and tightly with tin foil.
And stick them into the oven at 160 degrees for 3 to 3.5 hours.
So we're going to start to prep our beetroot now for our beetroot salad. We're going to do a nice quick pickle, which means we're going to heat the pickle brine, and that will quickly pickle the beetroot. So what you'll need for that is a decent vinegar. I'm going to go with cider vinegar. And for this pickle brine, it's about 70-30, vinegar being the 70 and 30 being the water. Okay, a load of that in there.
And then we're going to add the water.
And then in there, we're going to put our aromats. So aromats are any kind of spice or herb that pervades a really strong flavour. So a couple of star anise, and I've got some fennel seeds here. Fennel and beetroot work amazingly well. And then the other important thing for your quick pickle brine is our old favourite salt. So a good amount of salt, I'm putting in probably about a teaspoon there. And sugar. Lots of sugar, okay? So probably a tablespoon and a half I'm putting in there. You want it to be kind of sweet. So beetroot's fairly sweet anyway, but it's got that really strong earthy flavour, and a little bit of extra sugar will really give it that kick up the bum. And then that's going to go onto the heat. Got that now on a medium heat. You don't want it on too strong heat because you don't want it to boil, but you do want those aromats to sort of let all their flavour out into the pickle brine. So while that's warming, we're going to move on to prepping the beetroot itself. I'm going to use 2 of these nice sized red beetroot, also a golden beetroot, and if I can find it, this one's a candy beetroot. Beetroot will stain pretty much everything. It will probably stain your board, stain your knife, and it will definitely stain your skin. So stick on a pair of gloves. And this is the candy one. You can see why it's called a candy beetroot now. Peel them round in a circle. It means that you'll end up with a nicer shape when you come to cut them. And then we move on to the golden.
The colours of raw beetroot are amazing.
You can cut them any way you like. I'm going to cut mine into nice little wedges for roasting.
And then they go into the roasting tin and we season that up with salt,
Pepper, a couple of star anise, a little bit of white wine. This is a delicious white wine. And a small amount of vinegar. I'm going to use the sherry vinegar again, but you could use a red wine vinegar or a white wine vinegar, which would be equally delicious. Beetroot are really earthy, so sugar as well. Final thing, drizzle of olive oil.
Now what's important with these
is that we cover them because we want them to kind of roast and sort of steam themselves at the same time.
and they go into the oven for 25 minutes. So now, the beetroot that we're going to pickle, we're just going to slice.
So with a pickle brine, your aim is that you want the pickle brine to taste 50% more than you want your pickles to taste. So it should be extra vinegary, extra salty, extra sweet, extra aromatic. Take a little taste of it. Oh, that's hot. Yeah, that's good. Does anyone else want to taste? And the colours of beetroot will bleed out. So you'll end up with some kind of quite interesting colours. Make sure they're nicely covered. You don't need the heat on anymore, so turn it off. But leave the beetroot in the pan, covered with a lid or a bit of tin foil.
And while that sits there nicely, we're going to prep all our herbs. So we'll start with the chives,
Parsley,
and some basil for the tomatoes, which we're going to move on to next and get those marinating.
So let's grab our tomatoes. Let's take the tops off and just any random shape you fancy. I'm going to quarter that one.
This tomato salad is so simple, but so flipping delicious.
So now we're going to make the marinade for these beautiful tomatoes, the majority of which will be a nice light red wine. But we're going to start off, we're going to grab a bowl, get a shallot, or if you haven't got a shallot, a red onion will be absolutely fine.
And you're just going to dice that really nice and finely. And we're going to need a few cloves of garlic. And then we're going to need a bit
Bit of acidity in there. Again, I'm going to use this beautiful sherry vinegar just because I love it. So for now, don't add too much salt, just a little bit, because it will start to bring out some of the moisture from the tomatoes, which is kind of what we wanted. A good pinch of sugar, a little bit of black pepper, and then you get to choose your red wine. So I'd say for these tomatoes, we want a nice light red wine, and I've got a beautiful Rioja here. There we go. You don't need loads. Give it a good old stir. You want the sugar and the salt to dissolve. Lovely. When that's all nicely dissolved, add a big handful of your basil, a little handful of the parsley, and a nice big handful of your chopped chives. And again, just coat those in the marinade. Now what I've done here is I've put the tomatoes in a small bowl and the marinade in a big bowl. And actually, I should have done it the other way around. So add your tomatoes into the marinade, if you've done what I've done, and make sure they're all nicely coated in all the herbs, all that beautiful chopped garlic, shallot, red wine vinegar.
And then just pour them back into the bowl.
And that dish is pretty much finished. It's always important to taste as you go. And what you're looking for is that like red wine tanniny flavour, but you want to look for that balance of sweetness, acidity and salt. Okay, so let's have a little taste. So good. The raw shallot is like so good with red wine. It's amazing. It's like, you know, when you get an oyster with shallot vinegar, you get that. That's going to mellow out slightly while you leave it in the fridge, and all of those beautiful sweet flavours from the tomatoes are going to come out, and that's what's going to make this dish.
So it's been about 35 minutes since we put the beetroot in.
Just going to check it. Yeah, it's perfect. You want a little bit of bite to it, but a little bit soft. So we're going to set those aside until we build the salad.
And now we can move on to the star of your dinner party. So we've got a beautiful bit of venison loin here. This is obviously the most expensive, most delicious bit of the venison, especially if you cook it right. You can use other things. You could use a beef fillet. I'd say a nice red meat suits it best. So I'm using venison because it's bang in season. So the first thing to do is to take off any of this sort of silvery stuff that you can see, because we're going to cook it very little, and that can, unless you cook it right down, can be a little bit tough in the mouth. So you slide the knife under the silver, lift it up, and just use the weight of the meat to guide your knife. And that's it, perfect. This will be lovely. Any bits like this, that's fat, and that's what you want. Fat is good. So we're going to do the same to the slightly bigger piece. So we've got the meat trimmed down now exactly how we want it, and it's nice and at room temperature, and that's how we want to cook it. And then we just need to cut it down so it's the right size for your pan. So just nice, smooth cuts with a sharp knife. And there we go, you can already smell that really gamey, meaty flavour that you get from venison, and it's going to go so well with those artichokes we've got cooking. So let's stick the venison to one side until it's time to cook it. And we're just going to recap on where we're at. The sliced beetroot's pickling, the artichokes are still cooking nicely in the oven, the roast beetroots are out cooling, and your tomato salad is marinating in the fridge. Still to do, I'm going to show you the simplest of sauces using a jar of pickled walnuts, which will go with the venison. And then I'm going to get my friend Kelly to come and join me to make the poaching liquor for our dessert. But before all of that, we need to prep these pears.
We are going to peel them, core them, and we're going to stick them in a little acidulated water, and that just means water with a bit of lemon juice in it.
Once you've peeled and cored all 6, it's time to make the Amaretto Chantilly cream. Pop the double cream into a bowl, a couple of tablespoons of icing sugar, add a generous slug of a really good Amaretto, and then whisk it all up together.
You can use a stand mixer for this, which would obviously take a lot less time, but I'm going old school. So make sure it's all nicely combined, and then whisk, and keep whisking until you get it nice and thick. You know the score, it's got soft peaks and all that business. Okay, so that's the thickness we want. It's always good at this stage to have a little taste, to make sure you've got enough amaretto in there, enough sugar, etc. Yeah, you can really get the amaretto from that, it's great. That then just needs to go into the fridge until you need it. So this is one of my favourite ingredients, pickled walnuts. What we're going to use these for is number one, the walnuts themselves, which are going to go on the artichoke and venison dish. But we're also going to reduce the vinegar from the pickled walnuts and make a beautiful sort of sticky sauce. Grab a sieve, pour the walnuts through into a pan. Make sure you've got as much liquor off them as you can. Pop the walnuts onto your chopping board, and we're just going to chop them. And then with the liquor, add a small amount of sugar, and you're just going to reduce that down until it's almost thick. Keep your eye on that, and that's going to be your sauce for the venison and artichoke. We're going to plate up everything now, ready for the table. So all we're going to have left to do is to cook the venison. So I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff. Thank you very much. And just clean down the surface. It's always good to work clean. Like, that's one of the best things that I was ever taught as a chef, is if you've got a clean surface, it gives you a nice sort of clean blank canvas to work with. So let's start with plating up the beetroot. You've got parsley. So just make a nice big bed of that. Parsley and beetroot, absolutely delicious. And just place them nicely. So people say you eat with your eyes. You don't, you eat with your mouth. But if you've spent a lot of time making something that you really care about, it's important to kind of, you know, honour that by making it look nice on the plate. In the bottom of here, you've got all this beautiful oil, beetroot juice, the vinegar, the salt, etc. that you've got. Grab a big spoonful of that and put it over the top. That's going to be kind of like your dressing. And then you've got your pickled beetroot, which has been sitting. And you'll see that they kind of become almost a sort of uniform pink. Now, it's worth tasting them. One, because they're going to taste amazing. And two, because it's worth knowing what they taste like. Absolutely perfect. You can hear how crunchy they are. And that's what you want, because the roast beetroot's going to be kind of soft. And that kind of like contrast between textures is what we're after. Place them around the plate. Make sure you're not getting too much of that vinegar. You don't want it to be too acidic. And there we go. Then, if you've got any spare chives left, take a few of your chives, little sprinkle over the top. There we go. I like to get the dessert ready before everyone's sat down, because there's nothing worse than getting up in the middle of the meal and having to make dessert. So I've got Kelly here to help me. We're going to get the liquor ready for the poached pears into this pan, and we're going to make a kind of mulled wine.
Lovely.
Let's finish off that riocca that we used earlier for the tomatoes. And we'll top that up with a bit of the acidulated water. Essentially what we're doing here is like a mulled wine. So it's like all of those kind of aromatics that you associate with mulled wine. If we had cloves, I'd stick some cloves in there. But what we have got is some star anise. So do you want to chuck all of that in there?
Yeah, great.
Nice. I've got a bit of nutmeg here. And we'll just put a little pinch of that. Nutmeg's pretty pokey, so there we go. If we had some cinnamon or like some allspice or something, we could stick that in at this point. But I reckon we've got enough kind of spices and flavours in there. But the most important thing, desserts obviously have to be sweet.
Yeah.
So we're going to stick a load of sugar in. So this is golden caster sugar. And I'm going to stick pretty much all of that in. That's probably about 150 grams in there. So we've got 6 pears, 1 each.
Yeah.
And we're going to pop those in. Whoops.
Slippery.
Slippery fish. Whoops.
How long could you leave those in there? Say you were cooking...
Indefinitely.
Yeah.
But what we're going to do, we're going to leave those in there, and then when everyone's looking like they're sort of starting to finish their food, we'll stick them on. We've already got the amaretto cream ready. They'll take about 15, 16 minutes.
And you just gently poach them?
Just gently poach them, yeah. So you just stick the heat on, and when it comes up to heat, they're ready. That's it.
Sounds great. That smells delicious.
Thanks. Cool. So the pears are ready to go. So I'm going to get the last bits ready. If you want to gather everyone together and sit down, and I'll start cooking the venison. Cheers.
Brilliant.
So everything is ready now apart from the venison. So this beautiful venison loin which you've prepped, we're going to cook it down now. This is the most important bit. You need to make sure everything else is ready. Get a nice solid skillet pan, or if you haven't got a skillet pan, a non-stick pan, get it on the heat. A tiny bit of vegetable oil or sunflower oil. So there's a lot of debate as to whether to season the meat before or after it started to cook. I always season it a bit before and a bit after. And this is 100% the most important bit. Make sure there's no distractions, nothing else going on. This is your time, okay? So, pop them into the pan. And it's important to turn your meat as often as possible. And you'll see, you start to get this beautiful coloration on the side that you're cooking. When you start to see that coloration, add in a little bit of butter. Now stick a little bit of your leftover thyme down one side, and that will start to flavour the butter and the oil. Grab a spoon and just start to baste your meat. The thing about venison loin is there is almost no fat on it whatsoever. So the more you baste and the more fat that you use, the more moist the meat will be in the end. We're looking for about 2 or 3 minutes on each side. Now is the time to add a little bit more salt, and if you want to, a little bit of black pepper. So I'm going to turn it one more time and give it one more baste. Then I would say that's cooked. So lift it out, put it onto a baking tray. And if, like me, you've got a few more bits to cook, stick those in now. Okay, so the pieces that have come out, they need to rest. And then cover it with the tin foil. Leave this somewhere warm, not hot, but somewhere warm. So I'm going to stick it at the back of my hob. And just so as not to waste it, I always just drizzle the butter over the top of the meat. There we go. And the rule is leave them to rest at least as long as you've cooked them for. So I'd say I've cooked those for about 5 or 6 minutes, but I'm going to leave them to rest for maybe 10. Like venison especially takes a nice long while to just release some of those juices and get really nice and soft and tender. So we're going to leave that while we plate the rest of the dish. So we've got the confit artichokes, which are still nice and warm, and we're just going to lift those out and place them around the edge of the plate. Try not to hold on to too much of that confit oil. So the artichokes are kind of like the potatoes in a roast dinner. So we're going to make a bed of those and we're going to sit our beautifully cooked meat on top. Then next to go on the plate, pickled walnuts. So they're just going to be scattered around the same as the artichokes. If you want to know what this tastes like before you send it to your guests, then taste it. So like, take a little bit of confit artichoke, take a slice of your pickled walnut and eat it. Oh boy. And like, you know that that's absolutely phenomenal. And you know that's what your guests are going to experience. So you know before they've all sat down what everyone's going to experience. Along with that beautifully cooked piece of venison, like, you can't go wrong really. God, that's so good. Okay. All we need to do is slice the venison for everyone. So I'm going to get everyone to sit down, grab a glass of wine, start tucking in, and while they're sat down, I'm going to carve the venison and we're going to have a great meal. Come on kids, scrubs up, let's go. Woo!
Oh wow, this is amazing.
We've just got one more dish to send out, which is the venison. So we've already prepped the artichokes and the pickled walnuts. Now we're going to take the venison, which should have rested long enough now, and you want to cut it with your sharpest possible knife. So take some nice, smooth slices of that, and so look at that, absolutely perfectly medium rare. Just as a venison loin should be. Look at that. So as I say, the focus is on sharing. So cut it really nice and thinly. Don't leave it to your guests to cut the meat. And then we're just going to lay that on top of the artichokes and the walnuts.
And the final thing is, we've got that beautiful little sauce that we made from the walnut vinegar. So just spoon that over your artichokes and venison.
And there we go. So that's the centerpiece for your meal for 6. So everyone's almost finished. We just need to get our pears on the hob. So they'll take about 10 to 12 minutes. And we just need our Chantilly cream out of the fridge.
Okay.
Thanks. Do you know what? I can teach you how to do a little quenelle.
Okay.
You up for that?
I've always wanted to learn how to do this.
Fine, well let's get all the bowls out.
Okay.
So normally what I do is I would do this after, but as we're practicing, let's give it a go.
Okay, show me how you do it.
Pull it towards you, like that.
Yeah,
Lovely.
brilliant. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. That's it. You've done it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Just pop that down like
That's
that.
better than my one.
Thanks. Okay, here goes. I'm going to do another one.
I'm just going to check the pears.
Okay.
They're still going to need a little while longer. Perfect.
Yeah?
Yeah, amazing.
For a beginner,
They all look identical pretty much.
pretty much.
So it's been about 10 to 12 minutes for these pears. I've just put a knife in them and they feel nice and soft. So we're going to drain them. And it's always worth keeping the liquor. I mean, essentially it's a mulled wine. You could drink it if you want. So you can see the pears have got a beautiful colour because we put them in that acidulated water to stop them going brown. And it's nice and simple. You've got a hot dessert, which takes no time at all because you've already done the prep before everyone's arrived. And if you really wanted to, you could reduce some of this liquor and make a really nice thick sauce to pour over the top, but I reckon everyone just wants to eat them now, so let's eat them now. Cheers. Having prepped everything in advance, I've been able to enjoy a lovely meal with my friends, and I'm gonna go and enjoy a delicious pear and amaretto cream with them now. Everyone enjoy it?
Yeah.
Wicked. Nice one.